Look at the stars, look how they shine for you, and everything you do. Yeah, they were all yellow. I came along, I wrote a song for you, and everything you do.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the East Asian Youth Summit. I'm so pleased and so proud to say that today is Asian Gold Ribbon Day. It's a day of pride and solidarity. I want to welcome you. That song was sung by Martin Kerr, who actually did a special tribute for the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign in our quest to reclaim the color yellow from the time of being called the Yellow Peril. And as you can see as well, the gold, the canary, the wings that we're all wearing. So thank you for joining us today. I want to start by acknowledging where we are in our lands from coast to coast, acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory that we live on of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call this land home. And I want you to join me in reflecting upon the past traumas, the hurts, the harms, the mistakes that we've made so that we can all move forward in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration with Indigenous peoples. So thank you for taking this moment. I'd like to introduce Sheila Wong, the co-founder of the Asian Gold Ribbon Campaign. Sheila Wong is from Toronto, and for whom the success of this campaign would not be possible without her. She is an amazing visionary that has made the dreams of this campaign come true, and I can't thank her enough. I'd also like to introduce Liam Olsen from Vancouver. Liam is completing his studies in political science and history at McGill University. Liam is our co-moderator with me today, and he is one of our youth ambassadors of the Asian Gold Ribbon Campaign. I know that someday I'm going to say with pride that I knew Liam Olsen because he's going to be changing the world and doing such important things, and this being one of them. So thank you, Liam. I also have the privilege of introducing our honored guests. Welcome to Minister Bardish Chagger. We just had a wonderful Act to End Racism panel discussion. And the Deputy Minister, Quan Watson, is here with us today as well. Thank you for joining. Former Cabinet Minister Teresa Wupa, Judge Albert Wong, MP Shaun Chen, and Deputy Minister Beverly. So many amazing panelists that we have. We're so honored to have you here with us today. You being here says a lot about you and your integrity and your commitment to anti-Asian racism and your desire to enter into conversations that are hard and to hear from our Asian youth. The youth is our future. There's the change leaders and the future of tomorrow. So hello, youth panel. We have Emma, Oscar, Cassie, Arya, Jasmine, and you will all get to hear from them a little bit more later on. So to kick off the inaugural East Asian Youth Summit, I want to tell you about the goals of the summit. Right now, we are in a state of crisis. This year, the increase that's been shown through the Chinese Canadian National Council in Toronto of the statistic of 84 East Asians that have reported the crimes against them. And so for that reason, we put together this year, this East Asian Youth Summit. But we know that statistic only reflects a portion of the reality. There are Asians that are being targeted throughout the world, and that racism against Asians is not a new thing. It's long lasting. It's about 150 years old, in fact, reminiscent of days like, in the 19th century when we were referred to as the Yellow Peril. And COVID only fuels that, reviving that racism and bringing it into present day. So the Asian Gold Ribbon Campaign also wants to recognize the uptake of COVID-19 in cases in India. So the rise of this new variant, and what we're seeing is now an upsurge of racism against South Asians. And so we're not in this alone. We need to rise in solidarity together. And we, as the Asian Gold Ribbon Campaign, offer support and solidarity with all 48 Asian communities and recognize globally what's happening. As well, we know the what we're able to do to have this platform wouldn't be possible without the work of other racialized groups. We stand on the shoulders of Black Lives Matter and Indigenous people with the Truth and Reconciliation. It's the pathway that they have laid forth for us to be able to have these conversations about racial justice. So we give thanks and acknowledge that important work. The goals and objectives of our youth summit is really to focus upon what are our youth feeling? How are they doing in the context of what's happening today with COVID-19 and anti-Asian racism? What's on the top of their mind? And we would like our honored guests to talk with them. Let's look for solutions. Let's not, we're not going to talk about platitudes. It's the idea of generating ideas, and we want to come forth when we conclude with some calls to action. That will be a draft, of course, and that will revise and that will publish and share with various sectors of the community. So we want this to be effective. We only have an hour and a half, so I'm trying to talk fast. And I want to share with you the themes of Asian Heritage Month. So recognition, and how important it is to see the contributions of Asians and honor our stories. Resilience is also another theme. So the importance of working together to overcome, that there is hope and optimism for social change. And finally, resolve. The theme of resolve in all our communities to eliminate racism and to resolve racial injustice for all vulnerable groups. So with that, I would like to share the schedule of our program. So as I mentioned, the time is going to go very quickly. We'll have an introduction of our youth panelists, and following, we'll have our opening address to the youth from our honored guests. And then we will go right into the panel discussion with our youth. We have met over 3 weeks for over 6 hours, and we've generated 3 themes that are important to them. And so we share that with you today and look forward to what our honorable guests have to say in response. And then of course our draft of calls to action. And because of the time, we are having our Q&A after the 5 p.m. We know that not everyone is going to be able to stay, but we hope you can, and we can have some conversation following the summit. So I'd like to turn it over to my co-moderator, Liam.
Thank you, Gina, for getting us started. So my first note is actually going to be technical. I'd like to direct everyone's attention to the bottom of the screens. You'll notice this is a little bit different than a normal Zoom since we're on a webinar. So you'll notice there is a chat button and a Q&A button. We're requesting that for this, you only direct technical concerns or questions to the chat. So for example, if you're having a problem with audio or those kinds of things, put them in the chat, and James and Sheila are our resident tech experts or Zoom experts. They will help you out. We're also encouraging people to think about what is being said and also post questions though. And like Gina just mentioned, those can be addressed at the end by everyone. If you have questions, that will be over in the Q&A column, and you can put those there.
So we're inviting Sheila Wong to come forward, and we're going to share a poll.
Okay, we would like to understand our audience a little bit. So our host, James, will put up the poll while we continue talking. And we'd like you to fill that out. We're going to leave it up for a couple of minutes, but we're going to continue on. So feel free to answer the questions as you go. I just wanted to say that I'm so excited, Gina, to announce that we are truly a global event, which is what we set out to do. We have 11 countries represented here. Outside of Canada and the United States, we have Brazil, Fiji, Ghana, Indonesia, India, Iraq, Nigeria, Ukraine, and Australia. I also want to do a shout out to my new friend, Cindy Lee, representing Mayor John Tory's office. Sadly, we couldn't fit Mayor John Tory into our program because we brought him in quite late in the game. But I met Cindy just last week, and I am excited to say that she's going to be joining the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign for next year. personally, as well as part of the mayor's office. So welcome, Cindy, and thanks for all your support.
Thanks so much, Sheila. So we'll have the poll up for another few seconds. Hopefully we have some good data once we end our webinar. So Liam, we're going to introduce our youth panelists.
Yes, we are. And we're super excited to introduce our 6 youth panelists today, coming from across the country. First, I'm going to invite Emma to introduce herself.
Hello, honorable guests, VIPs, and attendees. My name is Emma Yee. I am in grade 11. I am from Edmonton, Alberta. I am half Chinese on my dad's side. My mom is Caucasian with a big mix of different European ethnicities. And I am here today because being Chinese is my identity. It's a part of who I am, and I want to give back to my community.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Emma. And next we have Arya.
Hi, honorable guests and attendees. Thank you for being here. My name is Arya. I live in North Vancouver, BC. I'm in grade 10, and I am Chinese on my mom's side and Irish and Swedish on my dad's side. I decided to take part in the Youth Summit because when I heard about all the Asian hate crimes going on, I wanted to take action. Even though they aren't affecting me personally, they are upsetting and unfair toward my community, and I want to show my support.
Thank you, Arya. Next we have Oscar.
Hi, honorable VIPs and attendees. I'm Oscar here. I'm currently studying in grade 12 as an international student. I have experienced both Canadian and Asian education system, and I'd like to share my experiences in Canada. As an Asian, I feel proud living in Canada, which has a friendly environment for many different races. I'd like to continue building our environment a better place and devote myself in anti-racism. So that's why I engage in Asian Gold Ribbon event. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks, Oscar, and thank you for being here. I believe next we have Jane.
Oh, hi, honorable guests and attendees. My name is Jane. I'm in grade 11 from Ontario, and the reason I want to be a part of this campaign is because I think that our heritage is such an important part of our identity, and I know I struggled with embracing mine. So I wanted to be able to help others and be who they are.
Thank you, Jane. Cassie.
Hello, everyone, honorable guest attendees. Thank you guys so much for being here today. My name is Cassie. I'm in grade 12 in Edmonton, Alberta, and I'm Chinese biracial on my mom's side, and my dad is Caucasian. And I wanted to get involved today because as a young female Canadian Asian, I have every stereotype against me to stay quiet and not make waves and not talk about social events that are going on that affect me. And I want to break all those stereotypes. So I'm really glad you guys are here to listen today.
And we're glad you're here too, Cassie. Thank you so much. And finally, we have Jasmine.
Hi, honorable guests and attendees. My name is Jasmine. I am a grade 11 student in Markham, Ontario. I'm full Chinese on both my mom and my dad's sides. And the reason why I wanted to participate in this campaign is because I wanted a platform to speak up about Asian issues. And because I truly believe that it's not enough to just not be racist, we must actively be anti-racist. And I think this panel is a part of that.
Well said, Jasmine. Well said. Thank you, youth panelists, for introducing yourselves. I'm now going to pass it back to Gina, and she's going to explain the format for the next part of the event.
Well, I first want to say thank you to our youth panelists, because it takes courage to do this, to speak out, to be in a public forum, to talk about your own experiences, the vulnerability of that and the courage that it takes. We just want to tell you how much we appreciate that. And we also want to say that our youth panelists are representing their own experiences. They're not speaking for all East Asian youth by any means. They're here to talk about what their perspective is and what is happening for them. So we do invite, of course, our audience to write in the Q&A and share with us what's happening for them. We know we're not representative of everybody, and that's not our attempt either. So at this portion, we have the I don't know how the words to have. We have opening address from these honorable guests to the youth, and we're so excited. Liam and I will take turns introducing them. So Liam, why don't you start?
Absolutely. It is my absolute honor to welcome Bardish Chagger today. Bardish Chagger is Canada's Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and Youth. A proud daughter of Waterloo, Ms. Chagger holds the distinction of serving as Canada's first female leader of the government in the House of Commons, and was also the Minister of Small Business. Minister Chagger, welcome.
Thank you so much, Liam. It's good to see you again. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember meeting you in the pre-COVID world, and I can't wait to see you again in person in the post-COVID world. So hello to everyone and bonjour à tous. I would like to start by acknowledging that I am joining you from Waterloo, Ontario on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. I think it's important that we take time to acknowledge the land, because as we are at this pivotal moment of building back even better and consciously more inclusive, I think it's important that we know where we come from. And I will tell you, as a proud Canadian of South Asian descent, I'm not sure that we always know the full history of our country. And to the numerous individuals that we owe a massive debt of gratitude. And we definitely don't know who they look like. And I think that's why being together for Asian Heritage Month also is very fitting. As Canadians, during Asian Heritage Month, we have this unique opportunity to come together to recognize and honor the significant contributions that Canadians of Asian descent continue to make and have made to the growth and prosperity of Canada. Asian Heritage Month invites us all to learn more about the great diversity of cultures that make up Asian communities across Canada. As Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said, Canadians understand that diversity is our strength. We know that Canada has succeeded culturally, politically, economically, because of our diversity, not in spite of it. Yet we also know that a multicultural society, one that is truly open and inclusive, is always a work in progress. It demands our effort, our attention, and our care. Understanding diversity means celebrating that it has to offer, while also combating all forms of systemic racism, prejudice, and discrimination, including anti-Asian racism. That is why this year's theme, Recognition, Resilience, and Resolve, focuses on embodying Pan-Asian diversity and the invaluable achievements that Canadians of Asian descent have made in all sectors, as well as addressing the serious problems of anti-Asian racism in Canada, a problem that has been made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic. Let us be clear, anti-Asian racism is not new, just like Dr. Wong talked about. Unfortunately, for far too many Asian communities in Canada, anti-Asian racism continues to be a daily reality. The COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated the spread of stigma, discrimination, and violence fueled by anti-Asian racism. And I know that many of us, though we can't be together physically, in our social circles, whether online and so forth, have heard some of the commentary. And sometimes we have stepped up and said something, and sometimes we have not. And sometimes it feels like it shouldn't be on us to say something, because other people should also know what's taking place. And so I just want you to know that I've been there too, and I'm there too. And I'm really trying really hard to sometimes put my emotions and personal experience aside and call it out at every single opportunity I get. This year's Asian Heritage Month theme recognizes the resilience and perseverance to overcome the adversity people of Asian descent in Canada have faced throughout our history. It also points to the resolve to take on the numerous challenges that we face today. And all Canadians must resolve to do better. All Canadians must resolve to be better. Last fall, as part of Canada's anti-racism strategy, our government announced funding under the Anti-Racism Action Program. We supported 85 projects worth $15 million, empowering communities on the ground who have expertise in addressing and combating all forms of racism and discrimination, including anti-Asian racism. And I'm proud to say that the program supported local community organizations like the Toronto chapter of the Chinese Canadian National Council for its project examining the presence of online hate on media platforms in the Chinese language media in Canada. In addition to the Anti-Racism Action Program, we also had the Community Support for Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism Initiatives Program, which supports local, regional, and national initiatives and events that aim to combat racism and discrimination and promote intercultural and interfaith understanding. And so I just want you to know that our country has this massive history. And we know with our history with Indigenous people, we've not always gotten it right. But we also have this opportunity as we build back even better to build back consciously inclusive. And I'll tell you, as a Minister of Youth, and the first Minister of Youth in Canada was a Prime Minister, and it's a portfolio that's really important to him. And so I'm really, really excited to be here with all of you. And I'm really grateful for you having this conversation. And I'll just give a shout out to Dr. Wong again for actually bringing about this campaign and having the courage of her convictions to do so, but then also not just empowering young people, but enabling them for you to have platforms to have these conversations. And I'll tell you, as a child of immigrants, I share stories that my family's not always okay with, but it's really important that, Canadians understand the struggles that my family went through for us to be where we are today, so that we aren't repeating the same systemic issues that we've had for too long. This year, we also marked the 50th anniversary of the Multiculturalism Act in Canada. And if multiculturalism is our strength, then we need to make sure that we continue to nurture it. And that means not holding people back with racism and discrimination in our daily realities, but actually enabling individuals to be their true, authentic selves. So I look forward to tonight's conversation, and I really thank you all for having me here tonight.
Thank you, Minister Chagger. There's so much wisdom in what you say, and you yourself are such an inspiration to our youth. Thank you so much. And we were joking at the other panel that we're going to have to shoot the memo about what's to wear tomorrow. Thank you so much. I now have the pleasure of introducing Albert Wong. So Albert served as the Canadian Armed Forces for 40 years. Born in Malaysia, Judge Wong was deployed to the United Nations peacekeeping mission and was involved in working towards strengthening government services. Today, he's a citizen judge in the Greater Toronto Area. Thanks so much for being with us, Judge Wong.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wong. And I also would like to acknowledge that I'm calling you from Mississauga. And in Mississauga, I'm in a traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. And in acknowledging that, I also want to acknowledge my responsibility in sharing this land, that I shepherd the land, I shepherd the air, and I shepherd the water for the rest of us and for our generations to come. This is what they've been handed to us. I just want to share a very quick story with you. I joined the Canadian military in 1976, and at that time, I think you could have counted the number of Chinese Canadians in the military in the fingers of two hands. I went to the University of Waterloo, just like the Mr. Chagger had went to the University of Waterloo as well. And my support base was Canadian Forces Base London, which is an infantry base. Now, I'm an 18-year-old boy, but I'm smart enough to know that you do not want to get caught out. So I made sure when I showed up at the base that my uniform was proper, it was completely correct. I even spit Shaun my shoes. No one is going to pick up on me. I'm going to slide in, do my work, and slide out and go back to university. First day, no problem. Checked in, everything went well. Stayed at the officers' quarters, it was lovely. Ate my breakfast the next morning at the officers' mess. It was table service, white linen cloth, the whole bit. Great. And then I noticed the sergeants and the warrant officers were saluting. They're not supposed to salute me. I wasn't commissioned yet. In fact, I haven't got to university yet. Still 4 years away from being commissioned. So at first I thought, well, maybe they made a mistake. Then more and more people started to salute me. So I ran to the regimental sergeant major's office and I knocked on his door and I said, Mr. Woods, and I said this quote unquote, Mr. Woods, we have a problem. He said, what's your problem? I said, your sergeants and warrant officers are saluting me. They're not supposed to. And he says, I know, I ordered them to. He said, and then this is what he told me. And this stuck with me for the rest of my career. One day you will be an officer and I want you to get used to it. And I want them to get used to it. And I went, oh. That session lasted about 45 seconds. I never saw him again, this regimental sergeant major, but that mentoring session lasted me the whole lifetime. It shaped the way I became an officer. Now, as youth, I'm sure you've heard many times your elders telling you, follow the footsteps of uncle. Please don't follow my footsteps, because you know why? Now, there are more Chinese officers in the Canadian Armed Forces than the fingers of two hands. So if you follow my footsteps, you get to the same door, which is already open. Instead, I would recommend that you use the footsteps that you hear, that the footpath that has been already established by all these distinguished speakers. Use the path to go through the doors that we have opened, so that then you can make your own footsteps and using your own key to open the next door. I think that's what we need to do. I'll leave it like that for now, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Wow, Judge Wong, what a story. And I'm sorry, I'm still just trying to take that in. I'm sure a lot of us are. I mean, I think one part that you touched on there that's super important is the idea of exoticism, and Asians being, will be officers like anyone else one day. So thank you for sharing that. I have the honor of next introducing Shaun Chen. Shaun Chen is the MP for Scarborough North. He has represented the community for over 15 years, including as school trustee chair and for the last 5 years as MP. He was named by Maclean's magazine as one of the 100 young Canadians to watch. MP Chen, welcome.
Thank you so much, Liam, and it's such an honor and pleasure for me to join all of you here today. I'm zooming in from Scarborough, Ontario, and of course, I too want to acknowledge that I am standing here on the lands of the Indigenous peoples of this country. I want to also say that it's such a wonderful pleasure to see the youth leading this discussion. You truly are the leaders of this generation. And I know that, as Judge Wong said, you are walking through doors and you're opening new doors and paving new paths, because the fight against racism, the fight against hate is something that we all must collectively do and consciously be anti-racist and anti-hate. It is so important for me because, as somebody who grew up here, who was born to an immigrant family, I can certainly share with you the experiences I had growing up and the types of hate and racism that affected me. I never thought to become a politician. It was never in my mind, it was never in my psyche, and it certainly was not something that I could look to someone else and see somebody who looked like me and want to become what they were doing and step into their shoes. I was able to run 15 years ago for the school trustee position in this area. And I remember it was the year I graduated university. I had a computer science degree and also an equity studies degree. And I had all these interviews with these tech companies. And one day I came back home and I said to my parents, I'm going to run in the municipal election for school trustee. The first question they asked me was, how much does that pay? The pay was very little, $24,000. But the next thing that my parents said really hit home to me. They said, Shaun, remember, you're Chinese. And they were not trying to discourage me. They were simply trying to remind me of the salience of race, that I wore this Chinese face, and that for me to step into that boardroom at the school board, or to step into that city council, or to perhaps one day step into parliament, meant that I would be walking into a room that did not necessarily reflect what I looked like. And they said that, and I said, I know, but I'm passionate about the work I do, and I'm gonna try. I think I played it down a little bit and said to them, I'm going to give it a shot, but there's no guarantee I'm going to win. Well, fortunately, I won that election, 2 more after that. And then the 2 after that were for Member of Parliament in this beautiful, diverse riding of Scarborough North. I look forward to today's conversation. I thank you for inviting me. And I know that this will be a fantastic opportunity for all of us to talk about what we can do and reflect on where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, MP Shen. I'm actually emotional. I had to take a moment because what you say is so profound, and to hear that you actually didn't see yourself in this role, but went for it anyways. And some of the comments I can so relate to, what my parents might say. So yeah, I'm just touched and moved, and I'm happy to meet with you. I've been watching your social media and how much you're actually doing very much around anti-Asian racism. So thank you for that. It's just my pleasure to meet you. So I want to next introduce Teresa Wupa. Teresa has kind of taken me under her wing and been mentoring me. I'm so grateful to her for everything that she's been doing. So Teresa was Alberta's first Asian Canadian cabinet minister starting in 2008. Teresa is a trained social worker and is a leader and conduit for community building. She was a school board trustee and an MLA. She founded ACT Foundation and is involved in social justice advocacy work, such as her role with the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusivity and ACT to End Racism. Thank you so much for joining us, Teresa. I look forward to your address.
Well, thank you very much, Gina, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for including me today on this very important conversation. I just readjusted my my notes, so I'm gonna just go, and I'm gonna start with where I came from. So I came to Canada in 1972 as an adolescent who actually practically did not know any English, but at the same time, I'm the fourth generation in my family to be here. So I at that time, of course, I did not appreciate the impact of the head tax, the Chinese head tax, and the exclusion on my family, for generations of my family. My grandparents were separated for 33 years. And my father actually met my grandfather at the Old Calgary Airport at age 41. And and that is my family. And I think later on, I come to realize the importance of policy. But when I was studying social work at U of C, actually, that was not my favorite course. And it later on did shape my life. I think from there, I benefited. I'm one of the blessed ones and benefited from what Canada has to offer. A strong public education system, accessible post-secondary education. And I also benefited from many supportive and mentors and also supportive men in my life. Unlike Shaun, even though, when I felt compelled to demonstrate outside the school board to support to go against the cut to ESL funding by 50% when everything else was cut by 3%. My father said, why don't you pick something that's nice to talk about in public, and instead of something that is so unpopular. And but after that, it was my father, it was my father-in-law, it was some of the elders in the Chinese community and my mentor from different walks of life who actually encouraged me. I never thought that I would run for office neither. That wasn't my plan. I was very busy building 7 nonprofit organizations and raising 3 children. And but I think all of those extraordinary journeys, experience paved my way to run for office. And it was when I started to advocate for the Chinese community for inequitable access to resources and services that I experienced systemic discrimination. When I became a school board trustee was when I received my first letter to call me the yellow peril. And the following week, a teacher told me, Teresa, you have to work extra hard because a lot of parents do not think someone like you represent them. And but I think what I would like to share with you is, yeah, I experienced different challenges, but what is important is I did not see them as challenge. I think I just deal with it and I move forward. So I just want to say, I think that it's been a great journey. It's been great learning. So I look forward to talking to you.
Ms. Woo-Paw, that's pretty incredible. I think most people, if they face that, would at least call it a challenge. So thank you for sharing your story and thank you for being here. Okay, I have next the pleasure to introduce Bev-Yi. Bev-Yi is Alberta's Deputy Minister of Environment and Parks. Appointed in 2018, she has led Alberta's climate change strategy, among other initiatives pertaining to environmental stewardship. Before entering the civil service, Ms. Yi was a high school physics and biology teacher, lots of education connections. Deputy Minister Yi, welcome.
Thank you so much, Liam. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to be surrounded by youth. I made a comment earlier when we signed on that it makes me feel younger to be surrounded by so many young people. Wonderful. Yeah, let me just say a little bit about who I am. And as Liam said, I started out my career as a high school teacher, and I taught in Calgary in a very large high school with a very significant multi-ethnic makeup in the student population. So I felt at home there, and certainly didn't feel any issues there. From teaching, after teaching for 9 years, I moved to the government of Alberta, and I've been here over 20 years in a number of different senior leadership positions in a number of different departments. I have to say that my journey as a leader, my career journey, has been generally a very positive journey. And when I reflect back on what made a difference, it's mentors. I have had 3 very significant mentors in my life. And the reason they're important is that mentors are a source of wisdom. They're a source of emotional support. My mentors have been people who have motivated me and encouraged me. They've served as very important role models. And one of those mentors actually was my dad. And I remember a time early in my transition to the government of Alberta. I was having a rough time here. Things weren't good. I wasn't feeling good. There were things that are happening that didn't make me feel very confident in myself. And I remember driving home from Edmonton to Calgary and spending the weekend and talking to my mom and dad about this experience. And I was in tears. My mom, of course, as a good mom will do, sat beside me, holding my hand, trying to console me. Throughout the whole thing, my dad never said a word, never said a word. And then when I was done with telling him all the things that had gone wrong and what my struggles were, then he started to speak to me in Chinese and spoke some kind of a proverb in Chinese that I didn't understand. And so I said, Pa, can you translate that to English to help me understand what is it that you said? And he goes, daughter, he says, big trees catch the wind. And if you want to be a big tree, things are going to happen. Wind is going to rustle through your branches and rustle the leaves. And at the heart of it, you're focusing on the wrong thing. He said, you need to focus on your roots. You need to focus on that foundation that grounds you. And, you know, at the time, I have to be honest, I was younger then and didn't really realize the significance of that. But as I grew in my career, I recognize it's those roots, my Chinese roots have grounded me and they have made me strong. The things that happen that are tearing away at my leaves and blowing at me, they aren't the things that matter. I need to learn how to deal with them. And you know, racist activity, that's the kinds of things that we have to learn how to deal with. But we need to focus on our roots and the things that ground us and are real. And I'll leave my opening comments there. I'll have lots more to say later on and look forward to hearing from the youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. I resonate so much with what you say about the importance of roots. I find myself actually getting more connected with my roots now in this journey, you know, thinking about my experiences of racism growing up and how I actually in my own way denounced my roots and how important it is to reconnect. And you know, all that you say, because the strength is there. So thank you for sharing that. I now turn to Daniel Kwan Watson, the Deputy Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations. I just have to say how much I've enjoyed speaking with you, Daniel. The other day we had a nice, lovely visit. So Deputy Minister Kwan Watson has served as Director General of Aboriginal Justice Directorate, the CEO of Parks Canada, and the Chief Human Resources Officer of the Government of Canada. Daniel is well known for his open letter he wrote in December of 2020, recounting his personal experiences with racism, where he estimated 10,000 acts of racism throughout his life. I have used this letter myself in response to groups and individuals who have not believed that racism is actually a part of Canada. So thank you so much for that letter and for being here today. And we would love to hear what you're saying. You're on mute.
You'd think that after 14 months I'd have figured it out, but sorry about that. So I am joining from the Treaty 6 territory in Edmonton, along with Bev and Gina and some others. I think it was Emma, if I recall correctly, but the home of the Métis Nation of Alberta, and it's a thrill to be here. And great to be here with a number of people that I'm just meeting, and some who are longtime colleagues. At one point in time, Bev Yi and I controlled every park worth visiting in all of Alberta between the two of us, and it was a great time, wasn't it, Bev? I was at Parks Canada, and Bev was responsible for the entire wonderful Alberta provincial park system. I spent a lot of my career being in rooms with anybody else who looked anything like me or had the type of background that I had. And it was interesting. I saw it as an opportunity. It was sometimes a lonely journey throughout it. But as Bev said, and as others have alluded to as well, it was overall a very positive experience. And I had a lot of very supportive people and a lot of people that really helped out. And there were also some really challenging moments too. And so I would say to the youth out there, if you hear one thing, I want you to remember that this panel of exceptional Canadians, right? Exceptional Asian Canadians, exceptional Chinese Canadians, exceptional any other version of Canadian that you might want to mention. But in the end of the day, compared to all other Canadians, an exceptional panel of exceptional accomplishments that only the tiniest fraction of the rest of the country will ever have. What you've heard from us, each of us, is that we've had moments of profound doubt throughout that journey. And so if you're young today and in grade 10 in the North Vancouver, or if you're in Montreal and studying at university, if you're just starting your career and you're doubting yourself, trust me, you're in really good company. And in fact, I would suggest that what I've heard and what a lot of the people have said here, it's actually confronting that doubt that has made each of us more resilient than we otherwise would have been. And I think that this is important because it's easy to read the resume. It's easy to see the list of accomplishments. What we tend not to put up is how almost each and every one of those things failed miserably at some point in time along the way, or at least we were concerned that it was going to. And when you get into that world where you're recognizing that there is this challenge in front of you, that you aren't really sure what you're going to do, but you persevere, you talk to your mom, you talk to your dad, you talk to your friends, you take some time on your own, and you figure out how you're going to deal with it. That is the biggest key, I think, to success for a lot of people. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you. I don't want to focus really on the accomplishments. I really want to focus on the fact that if you're feeling concerned or nervous or unsure, you're in really good company.
Okay, it is my turn to unmute. Daniel, thank you so much for taking us home and wrapping up there. That was a beautiful way to conclude. And I know all of you are anxious to put the spotlight on youth, but I do want to say this is an extraordinary, it's so cool to have all 6 of you guest speakers in this room, because I think it's fair to say for racialized persons, and in this case, Asian people, leadership is not just what you do in the positions, it's actually getting there in the first place and setting that trail for the rest of us. So the rest of us panelists you're about to hear from can follow in all kinds of footsteps. So thank you for really leading the way on that and continuing. I'm seeing here in the chat a bit of discussion about putting Sheila on. So maybe I'll let Sheila unmute herself. And
we're just going to skip. We're going to share the poll at the end, just in the interest of time. So we're going to move right into the youth panel discussion.
Okay, let's do that then. So I'm going to start with the general question for our youth panel as they pop up. Really informal. How are you feeling with everything going on? How are you feeling more specifically with the rise of anti-Asian racism and, quite honestly, like the racism against people who look Chinese? How are you guys doing?
Yeah, so hi Liam. To be honest, I'm a little bit exhausted because here in Ontario, our lockdown got extended to June 2nd. So not being able to see my friends has really taken a toll on my mental health. And seeing news and videos of hate crimes against Asians, well, it's really upsetting and it's very hurtful as well. But on a more positive note, I have been spending a lot more time with my family, being locked inside the house, which is good because they really help cheer me up. So I think I'll be okay.
Great, thank you, Jane. I think we have time for one more person. Pretty quickly.
I'll go. For me, it's been really heartbreaking. Something new happens every week and I cry, but like, it's good to cry. I let it all out. But like, it's so heartbreaking seeing people be blamed for something that isn't their fault. But on a more positive note, being here today and being a part of Asian Gold Ribbon has made me so hopeful. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely lots of good and bad. And again, I know Gina was saying this at the beginning, but I should just note, like, for all of us youth panelists, I think this is probably our first time being on a stage like this and also sharing these really personal experiences. So, you know, if there are kind of pauses and moments that are tender, bear with us. We'll get through this. But anyway, thank you, Emma and Jane, for that. I'm going to move into kind of our first main theme, and that is the theme of racism in our everyday lives, which we're kind of talking about, and in our educational system too. And so the question that we've kind of come up with here is, again, as students, we spend a lot of time in the institution that is school. It's an enormous bearing on how we learn, how we're socialized, how we see ourselves and are treated. So I was wondering if some of us wanted to share our experiences of identity, belonging, and racism at school.
Hi, yes. So as someone who went here to school in Ontario, I have experienced quite a bit of racism actually in our school system. It's very disappointing to see. So when I was in elementary school, I would have teachers mix me up with other East Asian girls, and it was really hurtful because they had been teaching me for so long. You would think that they would be able to tell the difference between us after several years of teaching, which was upsetting, you know, again, perpetuating that stereotype that all Asians look the same. And I also experienced quite a bit of racism because of the way I used to speak. Because my parents are immigrants, you know, I learned English from them growing up. And so I used to speak with a little bit of an accent, and I would have teachers humiliate me in front of the class, bring me up to the front of the class to point out the way I spoke to the entire class, like punish me for the way I spoke. And it was really very hurtful. It was very humiliating. I cried a lot. About that. So I'm really glad that Asian Gold Ribbon is giving me the chance, the platform to share these experiences, because looking back, it was so deeply racist, but at that time, I didn't realize how bad it was. And so in the future, moving forward, I would love to see cultural sensitivity training for teachers, because this type of stuff for children, it's so important to stop it at the root. Children, they're susceptible to these kinds of biases and information. If we stop it at a young age, then we can have a less racist society moving forward.
God, Jasmine, I'm sorry you had to go through that. First of all, that's shocking. This is happening like recently-ish too, right? Like, we're not talking about stuff that happened decades ago. Like, this is now in the 2010s and the 2020s. This is happening. Wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing, Jasmine. Think we got time for a couple more people to speak to this.
Yeah, I'd like to share how school has structured my identity and how I view myself. I think school is a social environment with lots of interactions and activities. However, I do believe the school has a dominant culture that's not mine. I have to learn others' identities and make them mine in order to integrate. I find it more difficult to make friends for me than others. While this might have to do with my language, I'd like to share one example of this. I would say it would be my name. I have an original Mandarin name and a preferred English name. This preferred English name is for the convenience for other people. Once I had a teacher who insisted to call all international students with their Mandarin names. I actually feel awkward when he did that because I'm already used to my preferred English name in Canada. I think this fact has demonstrated how the school system has impacted how I see myself and my identity. Besides this, I do find there's very little in the curriculum to teach students how to be empathetic to other cultures or have an understanding of other cultures.
Yeah, Oscar, thanks for sharing. And there's a lot there. I mean, what you said about names really strikes home because my mom is from Taiwan, and her Mandarin name is Weijun, but she goes by Wiley here. And she has a cousin who's about the same age who did, I think, the opposite, kind of like you were saying, who was like, no, I am, my Mandarin name, I'm Tsuting, that's it. And so I think it speaks just how complex and how important something as simple as a name can be. And we need to talk about that kind of thing. And what you said about curriculum is interesting too. I think we'll get more into that. So yeah, thank you, Oscar. I think we have time for one more person to speak on this, and then we're going to invite a couple of our distinguished guests to speak on this topic.
Yeah, I'll chime in a little bit to talk about just some curriculum things like you said, Liam. While I, unlike Jasmine or Oscar, I haven't really experienced any direct racism within the school system, but I find within at least the Alberta education system, there's a bit of a lack of vocabulary when it comes to teachers tackling Asian subjects or topics. So even in our social studies program, when we talk about different things in Asian history, there's a very Eurocentric focus, and it's not really telling any stories about the revolutions or innovations that Asians have brought to the table. And even things like the Vietnam War, they're described as proxy wars for ideologies. There's nothing really racially loaded within that subject. So I totally agree with Jasmine that there should be some sort of cultural sensitivity training, because when you're an Asian student and you're not really hearing yourself being represented or your story being told, it does mess with your identity a little bit. And when a teacher doesn't know what to say when you have a question about your own identity, or when somebody else in the class has a question about it, they often turn to the Asian people in the class, and then it's their job to become the educators when they don't really have any basis of the knowledge from the people who are supposed to be educating them. So it's been really interesting trying to navigate that within my experience in the education system, but I definitely think it's something we can work towards.
Yeah, and there it is again, right? The idea of exoticism and different standards. I mean, I think Teresa was talking about this a bit, and I know Albert. Oh, I should be calling you by your titles. My apologies. But anyway, I know there was some conversation about this too, and yeah, to hear Cassie you talking about that in the school, like Asians have responsibility to speak to like things that happened in Asia historically. I don't think that would necessarily happen with other groups, or with, you're not going to ask maybe white kids to speak to European history. Just my take. But anyway, I'll get out of the way here. I'm going to turn over to Shaun, Chen, and Bev, who, of course, you both spent a lot of time in the school system. Bev as a high school teacher, and Shaun as a school trustee. What ideas do you have based on what we've been saying for change in this area?
Well, first of all, I have to say that to the young people who just spoke, what amazing testimony, so incredibly profound, so incredibly thought out, and so real and raw and honest. Because I think what we're seeing clearly here is that disconnect. We as a country, we as provinces, we value our multiculturalism, we value our diversity, and we celebrate that. But at the same time, you heard very clearly from the young people how they have lived experiences of racist incidents. They have realities in which they do not see themselves reflected in the dominant culture in this institution that is education. And at the same time, we have teachers who are supposed to be engaging and informing young people, and they don't have the tools and the vocabulary and the knowledge themselves to perpetuate the type of inclusion that we really need to build. So what do we do as a community? I believe first and foremost, highlighting these lived experiences is critical and crucial, and contextualizing it, because we have come a long way from the days of the Chinese Exclusion Act and the head tax. And we have come to a place in this moment where we're moving back to that place on the fence where it can go the other way. For so long, we've fought for equality and fought for justice, and we've achieved it in legal terms. We've moved past the types of very violent incidents of racism, but the institutionalized and systemic racism exists, and it certainly exists within the education system. The education system is a reflection of society. It is a collection of attitudes and individuals and teachers who come from diverse, different backgrounds, and some of those might not be inclusive. And we also have curriculum that has been developed over time that has been based on a very Eurocentric model of education. So with all these factors in play, you have a system that is biased, that is racist, that is discriminatory, and it is through understanding the lived realities and experiences of the young people who just spoke, and who are able to tell their honest and real stories, that we are able to dismantle that system and to say, yes, we need to challenge the curriculum. We need to ensure that inclusive experiences, traditions, histories are incorporated in the things that we teach. We need to look at who is doing that teaching, because they themselves, as well-intentioned as they may be to support the diversity and multiculturalism of our country, might not have the tools. Because they themselves were never taught that. And then we need to ensure, of course, that we all are able, as educators, as people in the system, to deal with racist incidents and not perpetuate those racist attitudes within that social climate where you group a students together because you think they belong in the same
MP
group.
Chen, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but we're
Thank
running
you.
a little bit shorter on time. Yeah, did you have anything you want to finish up?
No, I think I will pass it to Bev, because I think she has a few things to say as well.
Perfect.
Thanks, Shaun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shaun. And thank you to the young people for sharing their experience. I was very touched by what I heard. And in fact, some of you, as you talked about, people struggling and mixing up students. I saw that even when I was a teacher. I said that I taught in a school that was very multi-ethnic. And I'm going to come at this from the perspective of a teacher and some advice I would give to colleague teachers that were out there. I think, I think Cassie, maybe it was you that mentioned about limitations of the curriculum. And I would encourage teachers to step outside of the curriculum and not let the curriculum be a limitation. And when I was teaching, and I'll share two experiences with you of things that I did. I remember the beginning of the year getting my roll call in a school that is very, very multi-ethnic, and starting to call out names of students. And I was challenged. I'll have to admit, I was challenged as to how to pronounce those names. But I also was not shy about asking the students, how do I correctly pronounce your name? And I know that after the first week of school, struggling with all this, I went home and I thought about there's something I have to do to help make that more meaningful. So what I started in each of my classes is I invited students to volunteer to tell us the meaning behind their name, because it was not only how to pronounce it, but what was really meaningful and would really help us to understand people is, what does your name mean? Well, it was a little idea that I had, but it was so fantastic that over the course of, and it took a couple of months to get through all the students in all 5 of my classes, right? But the kids took such pride in sharing the meanings of their names. Some of them didn't know the meanings of their names, so it prompted them to go home to talk to mom and dad about, what does my name mean? And it was, I happened upon that because of my own struggle with just pronouncing names. And then I also shared within my Chinese name and what my Chinese name means. So that it was just a wonderful way for me to connect and feel that empathy, that you talked about in terms of empathy towards other cultures and how to deal with other cultures. The other thing that I did as a teacher is that I did a potluck at the end of all my grade 12 classes. I did a potluck lunch, and I invited the students that they couldn't go to Kentucky Fried Chicken and bring just Kentucky Fried Chicken. They had to bring a traditional dish that represented their ethnic background. And oh my goodness, that again was something that was just so wonderful and so beautiful. I saw the pride that students had in telling the story behind their dish. And again, some of them did not know the significance of what, that traditional dish. But that was just, I feel in my small way as a teacher in the classroom, a way to promote a greater understanding of the diversity of our classroom. And hopefully that teachers can take away those examples.
There's a lot of food for thought there, running behind schedule. Okay, so I hope everyone's thinking and thinking of thoughts. Thank you again, Bev and Shaun, for sharing that, and all the youth panelists. We're going to dive then right into our second topic, and that is going to be solidarity and building coalitions. So I think we're just talking about right now, actually. We often talk about racism as being kind of like, something that is kind of like almost like white versus everyone else, and it's a one-way street. It's not. Very clearly, it's not. There's lots of racism. It's not just top down. There's lots of racism between racialized communities too, that we can all think of. So I guess the question is, and it's a big one, how do we kind of overcome the racism that exists between between racialized communities? And how do we look beyond that towards a bigger anti-racism movement?
Liam, I do agree with you. I'd like to share my journey in New York for this question. When I went to New York, I'm shocked. Like, it's a huge and beautiful city, but there was an experience that makes me feel really uncomfortable. On the subway, there was a woman who was from another racialized group making racialized remark on me. I feel really hurt and indeed sad to see this happen, because I believe as minorities, we should unite to fight together for discrimination. We must work all together to minimize further racialization.
True, and Oscar, I'm sorry to hear that you went through that, but I think what's probably even more terrible is that your experience is probably not unique. So thank you for sharing that, Oscar. Running a little low on time, but probably have time for 2 more speakers, so let's hit it.
I would like to add, especially during COVID, which is raising levels of anxiety and difficulty coping with situations, I find that sometimes people can act offensively out of fear. Those who are racist may be acting out of fear of those who are different and who seem unknown to them. Then people who are receiving racism may be going out in fear of being insulted or attacked, and this could cause them to act offensively as well, because they might not know who they can trust. This could be a bit like survival of the fittest or fear of rejection. I think that rather than being afraid, we should all stand together against racism, because all nationalities have gone through similar and difficult experiences. I think that if we join together, we can fight for equality and still value our differences.
And empathy is huge. That empathy it's humanizing and it's important. Thank you, Arya. Okay, I think one more person.
I might take a slight counter on this one. While it's nice to say that we need all racialized groups and minorities to join together, it's going to be a lot harder said than done, because how can we unite based off of our similar experiences without the erasure of the individual experiences of each minority? And Liam, you said something how sometimes it can feel like it's a minority or the white people against everyone else, but a lot of the time, what it actually seems like, it's the minority they're made to feel like it's them against everyone else. So there's been created these implicit biases within everybody to perpetuate racist stereotypes. And so I think with it being such a huge question, what we can start with, without just saying it'd be nice and easy for us all to all unite and stand together as one with our strength in numbers, I think what we need to start with is looking in on ourselves and our own implicit biases and our own internalized racism or hidden racist remarks. I think if we can all start with ourselves and then put it out, it will be easier for us to be able to understand one another if we're not putting out these stereotypes that have been put within us for each other.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cassie. So I don't want to get too distracted by yes, okay, fantastic. Yes, thank you, Gina. And yes, keep the questions coming and we'll address them towards the end too. Okay, so having just kind of said that, I'd like to invite Minister Chagger and of course Judge Wong into this discussion now. Both of you have very relevant experience to all this kind of thing with diversity and lots of racialized groups. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this topic and kind of the challenges that we're touching on.
See, this is where you see the power of the minister. I sent a note to the minister saying, please go first, and she just pointed at me. I want to thank the youth for this wonderful discussion. Just like the first panel, it was very insightful what you have to say. What I hear from you is that you're all trying, we are all trying to find our space in our society, in this society. We're struggling with language, we're struggling with our name, how do we call ourselves? We're trying to help people find vocabulary and find the knowledge. And something that Deputy Minister Kwan Watson said that was very interesting for me is there will be moments of profound doubt in the way we do things. Because we're defining our own space, it's easy to say we would not want somebody to come into my space. That's the easy thing to do. I think what Cassie, you just said it. Maybe we should use our space to invite the people we want into our space. We define how we're going to express out. So for example, I know there'll be somebody in the school that had brought a lunch that everybody's going to say you. It's for us to invite that student in and for us to inquire about the lunch. It doesn't mean we have to like it. We can also say we don't like it, but at least we are curious about, we want to normalize it. And so maybe in finding our space, let's invite others in. One last thought I have. There's also racism in our society, in our community. If we're going to define our space, we should also speak up to that too. So when somebody else who looks like us say something that we don't like, we should challenge that as well. Minister, over to you.
I agree with everything you said except for the preamble. I was just, we've been having this whole concept in our history of ladies first, so I just figured I'd turn the table and let the citizenship judge, the first person to welcome our new citizens into the world in. You know what, I'll tell you that as much as it's a very challenging time with the pandemic, as much as the pandemic has exposed a lot of the inequities that exist, I have never been prouder than the youth of our country. And I can tell you that the future looks so bright. You have given so much, and yet here you are in an evening having this conversation, digging in to spaces that you probably don't even want to talk about, but for the benefit of people who are around you and the future of our country, you're doing this. So I'm really grateful to you, and I'm really proud to be your voice at the cabinet table. And I really kind of wish I was having these conversations at your age, but I am trying to instigate them, so thank you. And I agree exactly with what Judge Wong has shared, and I think we can change the dynamics, but I love the recognition that communities are being pit against each other. Within our own communities, we are constantly dividing, and that's the way we've always done it. But let's change this around. Prior to as I remember, for one person to succeed, you would push other people down. And I've come in with the mindset that I'm going to leave the ladder down. For me, success as an MP or a minister of the crown, well, knowing that the next MP or the next minister does even better. And that's where it is. If I can lay a foundation that actually allows the people around me to succeed, then I will succeed. That's what's going to determine my success. It's not going to be about where I am versus everybody else. And I think that's where having those uncomfortable conversations. And what I really, really appreciated was racism and stereotypes are taught. When a child is born into this world, a child is born full of love. A child laughs, cries if they're hungry or have to get their diaper changed, right? Otherwise, they love anybody and everybody. They go to anybody. They'll try anything and they'll eat anything, right? Like, we teach them stereotypes. We teach them differences. When you bring different food to school, it's kids who are like, ew, why are they taught that? They're taught that. They don't just say that naturally, because as they get older, they become global citizens and they want to eat food from all around the world. So why not instill that? And even as we're talking about healthier eating and lifestyles right now, just think about the diversity of food in our country and where proteins come from and which cultures have better foods. And how can we bring that into, and that's why the food guide has revamped to recognize grains and proteins in all the foods that we eat. And I actually think this is a bigger conversation that you are instigating right now. And I look forward to continuing to build upon it. But I'm so confident for the future after this conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you both for sharing that and the really lovely discussion there. I think the good news is we're almost actually caught up to where we're supposed to be. I'm noticing, like, yeah, round of applause.
That's Waterloo. That's Waterloo in the house. You see that?
That's Waterloo. And it's politicians like speaking within time limits, which is great. So I really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. I know there's lots of questions coming up in the chat. So just again, a reminder, please put those questions in the Q&A, not the chat. Okay, well, we're rounding the home stretch here for the youth panel discussion. And the final thing we've already started is to talk about pride and healing, where we go from here. So given what we've discussed today, 2 questions. Number 1, how connected do you feel to your heritage? And number 2, what do you think is needed for personal healing? And is it the same kind of process that's needed for a kind of a broader cultural healing at this point, if I can say that?
I would love to answer this. So I'm extremely proud to be Asian. Growing up, my parents always taught me that identity is important as it defines who you are. So I am proudly biracial. I know my family's history on both sides. I know our history, our roots, our journey, and understanding this stuff has helped me connect with my culture even more. Obviously, my journey would be so much more different than my family's. I went to a Chinese bilingual elementary school. I did Chinese dance. My family does certain traditions such as Chinese New Year. And we have the expectation that families are priority. And I love my large, loud Chinese family. However, as I grow older, I do notice there is a lack of Asians in the media, film, TV, theater, music industry, school board, anything where we're hardly represented. And that needs to change, obviously. But when we are put into these roles, when I finally see someone that looks like me on the screen, we're often stereotyped. We're weak, we're the nerd, we're the sidekick. A big example of that is my favorite musical, as problematic as it is, Miss Saigon. The protagonist in that, she's so strong, she's extremely strong, she has so many amazing qualities, but she's still portrayed as a weak woman that needs an American man to save her. Representation matters. Asians are not portrayed as equals in the media or the performing arts, and this needs to change.
And Emma, you're in, like, you do a lot of theater and drama stuff at school, right?
I do.
Yeah, so it's like especially important for you and people who want to do what you do to see that example. Yeah, thanks, Emma.
Yeah, so I'd like to share something as well. I know that I had a different experience to Emma growing up. I really struggled with my heritage to call myself Chinese and actually be proud of it. And I remember it was just around a month ago when I realized my true perspective towards my heritage. And it was when I asked my mom a question. I asked my mom, are you proud to be Asian? And she responded in Mandarin and she said, proud? Well, I never thought too much about it. And so I then asked, when I say China, what do you think of? And she said that she thought of cleanliness and home, community, and family. And I remember in my head, I was thinking of dirty streets, polluted air, and cheap and mean people. And that's a lot of what we see in the media. And so I was definitely confused and ashamed So I want to look back to see where this feeling came from. And I realized that the shame started really young. It started in elementary school, like Judge Wong mentioned. I brought dumplings for lunch. And I remember my classmates would say things like, ew, what is that smell? And so I never wanted to bring dumplings again. Or when I was walking around with my family, I would make sure to speak English extra loud because I didn't want to seem too Chinese. And so I started rejecting parts of my culture. I remember I didn't even like Chinese food before, which is crazy. And I started forgetting my language as well. So when I went back to China and I could barely speak fluently to my grandparents, I was heartbroken, and suddenly I felt too white. And so I think this is just one example of an internal conflict that I face as a result of internalized racism. And there's a reason that I held the belief that Asian people were inferior to white people. It was because there was definitely not enough, like Emma said, representation of Asians in the media. And I know that all the celebrities that I idolized growing up were white because it was all that I could see. And seeing them praised only taught me further that being white was the only way to be considered beautiful or cool. So what really changed for me, I think, was to see other Asian people be proud of who they are, like my brother, my friends, my fellow youth ambassadors, Gina, Sheila, that founded this wonderful campaign, and our honorable guests. Yeah, so that really helped me embrace who I am. And so this leads me to what Asian Heritage Month means to me and what healing means. And I think it means to celebrate all the amazing parts of being Asian, because I know that it helps inspire other people that aren't quite there yet. And I think that there definitely needs to be more role models of Asians in the media, but we can start by being role models to our siblings, our family members, our friends, to help reshape the way that other Asian youth perceive themselves.
Jane, you are so brave. And you know what? After this, you're going to be a role model too, for sure. 100%. You're in this panel. There's people watching. This is going to be recorded. You are going to be one of the people that you need to see growing up. And that's why this is so important.
Am I supposed
Oh, sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I am very proud to be Asian. I love the culture and importance of family and spending occasions with them. I enjoy Chinese New Year and the Autumn Festival with my extended family. I love Chinese New Year's traditions such as the cleaning before the New Year and Chinese New Year's Eve dinner with family. I also really love the food. My favorite Chinese dishes are hao fun and sanjing bao. I can speak a little bit of Cantonese, but I would love to learn more and be able to speak it fluently one day. And I love being Asian because it makes it my identity and is part of who I am. I love that with Asian Heritage Month and the Gold Ribbon Campaign, I get to learn more about my culture and celebrate it. I think for healing, if you have gone through a traumatic experience with racism, it would be a good idea to talk to someone you can trust about it, because they can help you work through it and you will realize that you're not alone. I know that if I'm upset about something, always talking to my parents or my friends always helps me feel better. I also think that it's important to be proud of your heritage and stand up against racism. If you see it happening to others or yourself, call it out. Thank you.
Arya, what's your favorite Chinese food?
Hao fun or sanjing bao.
Nice. Good choices. Good choices. Thank you for sharing, Arya. I think we have space for one more person. Yeah.
Hi, yeah. So, oh my gosh, I have so much to say, but I'll try to keep it short. So, yeah, I totally agree with what Emma said about representation in the media. I mean, I know growing up, I didn't see much of that, and that definitely affected how I saw my own culture. And to speak a little more about healing, I think healing is different for everyone. Everyone is going to have a different experience with racism, and so they're going to have a different experience for healing. Maybe for you, healing is like what Arya did. Maybe healing for you is like Arya eating traditional foods and celebrating traditional holidays. Maybe it's like what Jane said, being a mentor in our spaces and looking for role models in our communities. Maybe it's, you know, connecting with your roots, and maybe it's connecting with your roots by talking to family and friends of the same culture, or finding online communities if you don't have those family and friends. And I think the most important thing about this is acceptance, because accepting who you are, embracing your culture, acceptance is the first step to true healing.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah, well said. And like you're saying, Jasmine, I think like acceptance takes different forms for everyone. And that's important too. There's no one kind of racism. There's no one kind of healing from this, I think, is what we're saying. Okay, I think we have our final two distinguished guests to speak on this. So Daniel Kwan Watson, Teresa Wupa, of course, both trailblazers in your field, and Daniel, of course, you penned that really poignant, just such a moving, important letter, I think, on this as well. How do we move forward from this moment? How do we become proud of our heritage and ourselves? I think you're on mute again, Daniel. Sorry.
Oh, well, I was just saying, go ahead, Teresa. So, okay.
Oh.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I will. So as I was listening, and you know that I was a school board trustee, I actually also ran a multicultural camp and Chinese camp for 8 summers. I also started a Chinese as second language weekend school for 10 years as a volunteer. I ran those programs and organizations. As I was listening to you, I was reminded how I had to try to hide myself when I was going through the social work program. How I listened for 10 years from the young people who were struggling with their identity. So I'd like to start with that. And then after those 3 organizations, I moved on and started the Ethnocultural Council of Calgary to influence policy and talk about collective actions. And then I founded the Asian Heritage Foundation to facilitate social change through arts and culture. And then I started the ACT Foundation to focus on changing the numbers of underrepresentation in leadership. So what I'm trying to say is, I find that after 30, 40 years of listening to the same experience, I don't accept that our institutions' lack of cultural competence, lack of commitment to real change. I don't accept that I should sit and I should receive the same kind of report from the Calgary Foundation, from Sustainable Calgary report, telling me the same numbers, telling me the same, that women, Indigenous, racialized Canadians are underrepresented. So I think I want to talk about the role of institutions, the responsibility of institutions. And it is the job of our education system to make sure that you are supported, that you are accepted, that your culture is valued, and your culture is represented in the school system for 13 years and 15 years. I don't accept as a grandmother that my grandchildren actually going to tell me the same kind of thing you told me. I actually organized 15 community consultations in 2016 as the chair of Asian Heritage Foundation with 66 organizations, 300 people. And the pride, generating pride for our young people was one of the 6 themes emerged. But we've been working on this for generations. And we have generations of young people missed out because our system have not been responsive and live up to the commitment. So if we think that all children and all teachers should be learning about coding, something I know nothing about, then our teacher must learn about cultural competence and inclusion. So I think that is what I want to say and minister as we celebrate multiculturalism 50th I think that we should actually ensure that this is the year we actually get inclusive curriculum across Canada. And let's not miss any regions. Let's institutionalize Asian Heritage Month. So that we have continued this kind of conversation. We focus on actually going deeper onto anti-Asian racism. And the ACT Foundation is doing our part by organizing Leader Summit in June with one focus on the needs and issues of younger leaders. And that's happening next month. Daniel, aren't you now regret that you let me go first? You're muted.
3 strikes and you're out, right? That's where the host just kicks you off the panel. So sorry about that. I'd say, first of all, never ask permission to be proud. Just be proud. And they are 2 totally different streams of action. Whether or not you choose to be proud of who you are and what a whole bunch of other idiots might have to say about you or your dumplings or your language or your accent or your clothes or the holidays you prefer or the friends that you keep, they are 2 totally different conversations. The people that are criticizing you for those things, you wouldn't take their views on which sports team to cheer for. You wouldn't take their views on which shirt to wear. You wouldn't take their views on where to have vacations. Why would you take their views on who and what you are? And I think one of the most liberating days that any of us have is the day that we decide just to be who we are. Now, for a lot of us, where there isn't a manual to show what that is, it's also one of the most terrifying days, because then you have to figure out what you are and who you are. And, you know, if you are somebody who has 56 people before you who've done exactly what you want to do and are exactly what you want to be and come from that background, then you got a lot to look at. And if you don't, you have to do that work yourself often. But I'm also going to say this. We've talked about role models, and it's clear that there are many places where there aren't. But look at this panel. Look at the youth panel. Look at the panel of those of us who no longer qualify as closely as youth as we once did. And look around where you are, the people that you respect. Chances are really good they look like a bunch of us on this panel. You've got role models out there. They may not have been put in some of the positions that you are hoping to be in, but go and break those molds, go and break those trails, but also know there's a lot of people who have done it already, and you'll be the next. And one of the most satisfying moments you're ever going to have is when you're sitting on the end of the panel that we're at now, and you find that you've encouraged somebody to take steps that they didn't think they were going to take. And the great secret to that is you can do that at age 16. And you can keep on doing it for the next half century and beyond. So good luck to you.
Thank you so much. Wow, I'm still soaking that in. What a great way to end. Thank you, first of all, to all the guest speakers for coming on and sharing a little bit of your very hectic schedules with us. I know you guys are incredibly busy and a lot of you have to run very soon. So thank you for the encouraging words and the thoughts and the experience. I know it'll go a long way with us. It really will. So thank you. Thank you, youth panelists, for being honest and sharing, and it's just been incredible. And thank you, audience, for sticking around. I still see we have 78 people here at the end of an hour and a half. So we're not quite done yet. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it back over to my co-host, Gina, and she's going to share some calls to action and wrap this up. And then we'll have time for questions and answers at the very end.
What an amazing moderator you are, Liam. Thank you so much. I feel so buoyed and lifted in spirit by listening to you all. The youth, we have so enjoyed working with you. I think we should just do another one so that we get to work with you more. It's been my privilege and honor. And to hear the address and the responses from our honorable guests has been amazing. This is the inaugural Asian Gold Ribbon Day, and I think we've set a standard. Thank you so much. I want to invite Sheila onto the platform here so that she can share our results, and I'll follow that up with our draft slide of calls to action. followed by our Q&A.
So that was an amazing session. Thank you to our youth panelists. Thank you to our honored guests, and it really does create a conversation. And thank you, Gina, for being the academic behind leading the young people to this point. I think that they've all felt that it has been beneficial. Okay, this is, most of you are, I think a good majority of you are very concerned about what's going on, and rightly so. We have a lot of young people here, which is great. 43% of our audience is in the age group that we were targeting. Some young adults who are probably just starting off in their career, and just a few old ones like me. But this is for you, your conversation. So thank you for taking the time to be here. I am really happy to see that there's not a lot of people in our audience that have experienced some slight attacks or microaggressions. And I think, Gina, it's something you might want to address later on, that microaggressions might be something that, we just don't, even realize. Like one of the questions in the Q&A addresses that. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sheila. It really does help to gather some of those statistics, and so important to report. I've been saying that we need to document our experiences, and just wonderful to see the group and to see and learn a little bit about you. I'm going to roll into the calls to action. So this is the beginning of conversation. This isn't the end. This isn't the middle. This is really the beginning. So I want to share with you, kind of put together as a researcher I am, calling together, amassing from the themes that we've discussed and what our honorable guests have shared as well. So I'm going to go over this very quickly, and I think that we're going to work and get in touch with our honorable guests and see how we can work it further. So this is our calls to action for communities, educational institutions at the local and government levels. So first and foremost, we talked a lot about the educational institutions in Canada, which is very fitting because of course our youth are so impacted. Our identities are so much grounded in what we learn in the schools. And so to recognize the importance of requiring cultural sensitivity training for staff and administrators to respond empathically and appropriate to race issues was one of the things that was brought up. Mandating schools to perform curriculum review from a critical race theory lens. And Teresa, when you were talking, I was clapping and singing inside because we need to make reform now. It's gone on for too long. What are the narratives that are perpetuated in our history textbooks? How is Asian immigration history taught? What's the vocabulary that's being used, and who does it benefit? So as well, teaching about structural racism and not erasing it. We also talked about the need for inclusion and representation. There is so much about, being able to see ourselves reflected in the culture and to know that we are part of the dominant culture. It's not, something that is different from who we are, and seeing these portrayals and those in leadership positions, just like our honorable guests are, makes such an impact to us. Third, making essential the inclusion of Asian youth at all levels, including local community, institutional, provincial, and national levels, to discuss issues and hear resolutions that impact them. I think today is an example of that, how much wisdom and how much experience they have to share that we can learn from. Also, very importantly, is the mental health and the well-being and healing of East Asians in Canada. Listening to our youth, I know that the struggle, what it felt like to have, a slight or our food to be, just looked at with such disdain, it tells us something about us, and mental health is so important. So we need funding for development of integrated services. I know this is a really quick sketch of our discussion, and we will continue to fine tune this. But one thing that I wanted to add that isn't on this slide is how much conversation like this, community building, to do more meaningful discussions like this, to involve youth. I know, in meeting with them, they've talked about how just being part of this has helped them raise pride in who they are and in their heritage. So, so this is an example of doing more around building community and for the youth to speak out and to have platforms like this. So thank you. I would like to open it up out to questions. Of course, our honorable guests, any reflections about the calls to action, and we will be in touch to share them and talk further as well.
Gina, are we going to allow people to just quietly remove themselves if they'd like until we jump into the Q&A? So
Yes.
James, would you like to put up the final slide for the people who want to leave? We're just going to take about 30 to 40 seconds for give you a chance to leave, and gives the panelists a chance to have a drink of water, and then we're going to dive into the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Look at the stars, look how they shine for you, and everything you do. Yeah, they were all yellow. I came along, I wrote a song for you, and everything you do. It was called yellow. So then I took my turn. Oh, what a thing to do.
Okay, welcome back. And we do have some questions in the Q&A. We have Benjamin Kim, who actually put in a great question on mental health. Why don't I look for you, and would you like to ask this live? I'm going to let you speak.
And we'll open this, of course, to all panelists and honorable guests to respond appropriately. I just want to say I'm, watching all those structures that will be lit up in gold for us on Asian Gold Ribbon Day. I'm just so moved. Thanks for those slides, Sheila.
Okay.
And yes, please ask questions.
Yeah, Benjamin, would you like to unmute yourself? Then you can ask the question live. If you're too shy to do so, just remain muted. Okay, you won't be able to. All right, no problem. So I'll ask the question for you. As an Asian Canadian mental health professionals work in a predominantly white field, what can we do to normalize the experiences of oppression and racism of fellow Asian Canadians and empower them?
That's such a great question. That's my experience as well, Benjamin. And I think the more that we talk about these experiences, in fact, I'm hoping to do some presentations at national conferences to speak about issues of racism against Asians, so that so that everyone can learn. It's not just about Asians being mental health professionals for other Asians, but that all psychologists, counselors, therapists need to understand the issues, and not just anti-Asian racism, but of racism, working on cultural inclusivity, looking at the ways that, in our education system, I know in our Masters of Counseling program, we do focus a lot on being able to be responsive in social justice ways. I hope that answers your question. It's very quick, but I think the more that we do, the more visible we can be, and to speak out and to talk about what we need, the more we can center and have Asian-centric dialogue in counseling and psychology.
Okay. Our next question is something you actually experienced personally. It's a tough subject matter for you, is on the topic of sexualization and sexualizing you as a woman, as an Asian woman. And also this person who's asking is as an Asian man himself, he feels that there's incredible demasculinization of Asian men, in particular on the internet. Would you like to address that?
Wow, that's a huge topic, and I think we could have panel discussions on that alone, because it's such an issue. of course, the sexualization, fetishization of Asian women. When Sheila talks about that as my own experience, I talk about, you know, being spit on to being hit on. And, you know, in my adolescence, that experience of, you know, being sung to in terms of, you know, little China girl and what that all meant to me. So it is so predominant, this idea of what Asian women are. I think it, you know, it starts back from, you know, wartime, what Asians were used for in terms of being comfort for the soldiers. And our dominant culture hasn't allowed us to be much more than that, unfortunately. And with representations in media continuing to reify that idea, it's hard to be more than that. But I think it's so important that we speak to it and that it's addressed in society, and we begin to see ourselves in roles other than being objects of attention. And when you talk about being male and how hard it is from that perspective, you know, I welcome panelists. It's not an experience I can speak to, but I know that it is a great challenge. So anyone on our panel brave enough to talk about that and what their experience has been?
Well, I'll jump in on this one. Because this is as Asian women and the sexualization of Asian women is a difficult problem, and it's very problematic. But as you saw with this crisis that's going through the Canadian Armed Forces right now, with sexual assault and sexual harassment, the whole idea of how we see women in our environment needs to change. And if I can just add this, men have a very important role to play in this. The minute we laugh at a joke or the minute we take part in a joke, we're part of that problem. The minute we keep quiet and turn away, we're part of that problem. So one of the things that we need to do in recognizing that this is an issue, especially in Asian context, what do we as men say? Especially Asian men. I think we need to have a discussion about that. And that's a much larger discussion of why are we quiet? Why are we silent?
Thank you, Albert.
I just want to add one comment to that. It is about power, and it is who has power, who own that power. My daughter actually is a musician in a leadership role, but she's starting her career. So when a donor said to her in 2020, how does it feel to be the exalted one? What can she say? So it is upon us actually to speak up, So I just want to concur what Albert was saying.
Thank you, Teresa. The experiences are current day. It's not just a thing of the past that, you know, this is the way society is keeping us in these small boxes. But the more we can speak up and work together and notice that it is about power and dominance, then I think we can continue these dialogues. Sheila, do you want to share the next question?
Yeah, there is a question here that we've all debated, and we've even touched on it slightly in this panel discussion. And thank you for bringing it up because we knew somebody would. What do you think of all the ways in which being Asian has been aligned with whiteness, and that we are closest to being white compared to, say, our Black friends and our Indigenous community? And so how has this affected the various racialized communities?
Such a great question. I'm going to start very briefly, and I would love to hear from our panelists. You know, with the myth of the model minority and the idea that, you know, Asians have upward mobility, we can gain social status. All we have to do is work hard, put our heads, you know, to the grindstone and that sort of thing, which means we can have economic success and that we are closer to white. Therefore, what do we have to complain about? And I think that when we look at racial justice dialogue, you know, when Asians are often sidelined. We're not even in those conversations, but we are beginning to be, and we need to be. So the myth of the model minority, I think, has a lot of influence on that. And yeah, I have lots to say, but I want to give time to our wonderful guests as well.
Would you
Does
mind
any of-
repeating the? Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. Go ahead, Liam. You want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Basically, the question was around the Asians being the model minority, and that how do we? I think the question is basically how do we overshadow the other racialized groups because we are closer to being white than the other racialized group. If I can summarize or if I can paraphrase that.
Maybe I'll make a brief comment. So first of all, I'd like to inform everyone here that the Act to End Racism Network have just produced and launched 5 videos to actually counter the myth of the model minority construct, and also on microaggression and the yellow peril, as well as the perpetual foreigner. So I hope that through these videos and the discussion guide that we all gain a better understanding on how this model minority myth have served to divide racialized communities, have served to silence Asian Canadians and Asian Americans, because the poverty rate of Asian Canadians is high and they have become invisible. And at the same time, Asian Canadian students get the awards on the stage, there are many that are falling through the cracks that no one noticed. They have become invisible casualties. So I think that we have to challenge some of those myths, even though some of us have benefited, but it also is, it adds a mental health toll on our young people. And well, I'm very bad in math. I cannot ride a bicycle and I cannot swim. So I don't meet any of those, stereotypes. So I would encourage you, as I have been for the past 20 years, to learn about some of these issues that impact, what we're experiencing, what we're observing today in society.
If I could jump in maybe on this question.
Thanks, Daniel.
We have some examples of this in the past, and I've said in a number of speeches I've given, when I began my career, fewer than 10% of federal public service executives were women. And you could go to any coffee room, any lunchroom, you could have almost any conversation in which the topic would eventually come up about whether or not women could ever be good managers. Like, that's in the course of my lifetime. If you did that today, you would be in deep trouble. But I think that we've seen this path before, because at one point in time, the only way to be a good unquote, good quote unquote manager or leader was to do it the only way that we'd ever seen it be done, which was, number one, you had to be a male. Number two, you almost certainly had to be white in the public service, and you had to be a Zeus-like temperament, screaming, shouting, doing whatever it was. Like, this was, the strong characters, and we build it into our leaders to be able to command respect. Well, what does command respect mean? Is there a place in the world of commanding respect for being quiet and contemplative? Is there a place for commanding respect for admitting when we were wrong? Is there a place for commanding respect for crying, maybe? That was not part of the world it was. So to this question that we have we been seeing ourselves through others' eyes? I think to the extent that we have these things that we're trying to be, and we have not defined them in ways that fit us, that we would want to bring to them, it means that we're borrowing other people's ideas. And I'm not saying that those ideas are necessarily wrong, but I don't want to be somebody else's version of good. I want to be my version of good. One of my challenges is I got to figure out what that is first, because I don't have a whole lot of places that I can necessarily turn to in the same way. So I'll steal shamelessly from all the people on this panel, just so we're all clear, and especially the youth. Like, I'll just go and steal some of your ideas because they're really good. But It's about not simply taking other people's definition of what it means to be a good leader, to be a good citizen, to be a good role model, to be a good doctor, whatever it is. Because lots of people have defined that. Lots of people have followed other people's definitions. But I'd like to leave a broader definition of what it means to be good. And what I hope most is that the youth panelists on this will say, yeah, that was good for him. I'm going to do even better than that. That is the goal.
Thank you, Daniel. You have such wisdom for us. I know that MP Chen would like to say something.
Thank you. I just wanted to tag on to what's been shared already. You know, in the education system, one of the things that I dealt with, and I know Teresa has also been a school trustee and a board chair, is the underachievement of racialized students, but in particular Black and Indigenous students. And some people on the other end of the conversation use that as a way to say, well, look, there's no racism because look at all the Asians who are getting such great marks and have high educational attainment. And then what does that somehow demonstrates that the system does not have bias, does not have racism. But at the end of the day, I think there's two important pieces here. One is we also need to look at culture, but in the sense that Black people in this country did not immigrate here. They came here as slaves. They were forced into the slave trade. And that is the generational trauma that is passed on from one generation to the next. I think historical context is so important. I can speak from my experience. My parents chose to come to this place and they chose to come here as immigrants. And with that came a sort of sense that you have to work hard and you need to go pursue that education that mom and dad never had the opportunity to pursue. So we do have that cultural aspect where perhaps we are taught to focus on certain things, but then sure, maybe the educational attainment is higher, sure. However, when you look at then what happens to people of Asian descent when they enter the workplace, they hit that bamboo ceiling. They are unable to achieve those higher levels of management. They are still faced with that structural and institutionalized racism. And so yes, hard work is great, but at the end of the day, the lived realities tell a very different story. And it's incumbent on all of us to recognize that that racism exists and we all have to stand together to fight it, whether it's anti-Black, anti-Asian, or anti-anything else.
So well said, working in coalition and together in the interest of racial equity is so important. I appreciate you sharing that. I am looking at the time and seeing that we have no more questions. So this is the time that we get to say thank you so much sincerely for being with us, our attendees. Oh, yes, I'm hearing something.
I just want to chime in before we go. Is this, as we are having such a thorough conversation, I'm so grateful for this opportunity, but I really just want us to take a moment to acknowledge how we've gotten here and the systems and who has informed them to bring us here. And that we cannot have the same 36 people who were negotiating Confederation continue to negotiate the way we achieve in the future. And I just want to say, by first of all, having young people here instrumental. We've not had a full voice at the cabinet table. Young people have not, now you do, because your voices matter. I got involved in politics when I was 13 years old. I'll tell you, my mom only ever prayed for two things. One was for me to stay out of politics. Two was for me to get married. And here we are, I'm not married and I'm in the heart of politics. So sometimes God gets it right. And I will just say to you is that I think we have to make sure that we are part of the decision-making as we talk about curriculums and we talk about all this stuff. We don't want the history of Canadians of Asian descent being taught the same way we're teaching our history with Indigenous peoples. So we need to make sure it's informed by the very people who know it best. So as much as we want to dismantle these systems that we have so much confidence in, then let's build systems that actually work for the diversity of our country. And I'm so excited to do that with you.
You're here. And I love how you just said, Dr. Wong, I have something to say, because that's something I'm practicing in my own life. I often sit back and say, oh, I missed my turn. But I love how you do that. It's wonderful modeling, and you've so So many amazing ideas, and we will follow up with you and everyone else here as honorable guests in our panel. I can't thank you enough, and please watch these structures in Ontario that are being lit up in gold. And thank you for joining us on Asian Gold Ribbon Day.
I swam across, I jumped across for